Welcome everyone to this free session on reading comprehension. We will discuss one of the popular strategies used in order to make the comprehension easier, right? Well, my name is Lindsay Thomas and I'll be your host for today's session. And a big welcome to those joining us on YouTube. If you're watching this YouTube recording, welcome and kindly subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're also looking for free resources, you can come and visit the India Law Test Prep website where we have some of the content free. For those who have opted to look through our free material, you're already here on the website. You will also have access to the recording as well as the worksheets associated with today's passage. So that should make life easier for you. You will have a copy in the PDF format. Okay, and I think the same passage will also be available as an online test wherein you'll be able to time yourself when you do the test. So those looking for the free prep materials, you can visit this website and you will find foundational courses as well as advanced courses. And if you may be interested in taking up a class with us, you will have to sign up for the full course and you will get access to all study materials. And if the course has live classes and instructor-led classes will commence where teachers like myself will walk you through the course material and have classes as such. So we have a syllabus lined up depending on the course that you opt to do. So for example, those looking at the LNAT course, the CLAT and so on, and the NLSAT, CLAT PG and so on, please choose the course that's applicable to you and then get in touch with us once you familiarize yourself with the syllabus and the content and the fees and so on. All right, so it's wonderful to be here and I hope that you can take away something from today's class. So let's begin. In today's class, the passage before us is titled Charities and Public Schools. Now, as we work with this passage, what we're going to do is touch upon some broader reading comprehension skills, and that is to identify a contextual vocabulary, try and see if certain words have positive or negative connotations, or even neutral connotations. And if there's a phrase or an idiomatic expression that you may recognize, right? So we'll work on those. But mainly, I think our main focus will be on trying to find the central or main point of each paragraph. Now, once you break down a passage like this into paragraphs, and the author places these paragraphs in a certain order because he's got a train of thought. So if you're able to find those main points for each paragraph, and then like a string of pearls, we string them together, you will have the central theme of the entire passage. Okay, so that's going to be the aim today. And I hope you are not very averse to taking notes because there's always a debate as to while teaching, are students expected to take notes or is it all going to be a mental note? When something is said and it kind of feels important, you make a mental note of it, or do you actually put it down in a notebook? Now, I am a strong advocate for taking notes because the reason is say for example, on this passage, I tell you something that resonates with you, and then you find it useful, and then you make a mental note of it. But after 10 days, you might not be able to recall what that thing was. But if you had a notebook where you kind of scribble something, right? You said, okay, this is what I think makes sense, that you condense the main point, right? You summarize the whole thing and then you condense it to one sentence. Now that's a good tip to start with, right? You make a note of that. In 10-15 days, once you start working on different passages, if you're able to quickly jot down what has been said, then it's always easy to refer back and see what worked for you, right? Uh, well, and then there are those who may not be very keen on taking notes. Now, this is a personal choice. It's up to you. You want to do it or not. But I would rather that you try to take notes as the class progresses. That way, if something important is being said, you don't miss out on it. Of course, this is a recording. You can always go back to the recording, go back to the timestamp and then find that information. But that's a tedious process, in my opinion. So let's begin. So what I'm going to do is break this passage down into paragraphs and present that to you here. So we have charities and public schools. I have about 6 paragraphs for you. And the exercise here is to try and identify what the main point is. Look for certain words will be given. Okay, these are context vocabulary, in the sense these are words that in that context will have a certain meaning. So even if you're not familiar with the word, because of the context, you will know what it means. Connotations are usually an association, a cultural association, or it's also an emotional connect one has to a certain word. And therefore, you will have a positive, negative, or a neutral connotation associated with some words. So we'll look at that. Idioms and phrases, as I've already explained, we'll have a look. Let's come to the first paragraph. Now, when you read this paragraph, keep in mind that this is the introductory paragraph. The author is making a point and he's starting the passage, right? So this is his introduction. So read it and try and make a note of what the main point is. Your main point should, it need not be a complete sentence. It can just be 3 or 4 words or 5 words, as long as you've captured the essence of the paragraph. You have a minute to work on this. All right, those who want more time can pause the video here and read. And those who are ready to go, let's look at this. So the first sentence of the paragraph is your topic sentence. It introduces us to the main point that the author is making. He's trying to define what a charity is. The definition of a charity is the main point of this paragraph, and how public schools, why they should be considered as charities, right? So that is the leading argument that the author presents. So if you were to ask, what is the main point of this paragraph? It's simply that the definition of charity is being defined, or they're telling us what determines or what constitutes a charity. Okay, and with a particular focus on public schools being considered as charity and why they should be when they are charging fees. Now, in terms of context, this passage has been taken from the Guardian newspaper, and we are talking about public schools. So, unlike India, in United Kingdom, the schooling system is divided into public schools and state schools. Public schools are those that are governed by certain trusts or societies, basically made up of citizens, and they charge fees. Whereas state schools are those that are governed by the government, and it's free of charge. You don't pay any fees to attend school if you're going to the state school. So in parallel, in India, we would call them regular schools and government schools. Okay. Looking at context vocabulary, these words must be familiar to some of you. To those who find it relatively unfamiliar, let's look at them. Charity. A charity is usually an organization that's set up to provide help for the poor, and sometimes they even raise money for those who are in need. Public significance. Now, the first sentence talks about what constitutes a charity, and it's a matter of public significance. A matter of public significance is a phrase that's often used as shown here. So it's basically an issue that is of importance and relevance to the general public. For example, when a country proposes a budget, right? And then certain policies come into play. Uh, these things, uh, these things are of importance to the general public. It affects everyone equally, right? So a matter of public significance is something that affects everyone. Taxable income. Income on which tax must be paid. Now here in India, the taxable income is referred to as income tax. Okay, but there it's the meaning is whatever the income, whatever has to be taxed, income on which tax must be paid is called taxable income. Connotations. Charity obviously has a very positive connotation, right? Charity implies kindness, it implies compassion. So therefore, it's a positive connotation. The word has a positive connotation. Taxable income, on the other hand, it is something that is owed to the government, right? So therefore, it's a financial obligation. Therefore, it will be a negative connotation. Remember, it's only emotional or cultural association to a word. The word by itself is not negative. It's just by association. So when you say that, there is some tax due, then it's talking about a financial obligation that you have. Therefore, a negative connotation. Moving to the next paragraph. Same exercise. Try and find the main point. If you know the vocabulary words, try and make a note of that. You have a minute to read this. All right. Now, this paragraph is exploring what can be classified as a charity. So initially, the author started with the argument that public schools cannot be classified as charity because they are charging a fees. And then he expands on the idea of what can be classified as a charity, right? So he says the institute has to demonstrate that its purpose has to be for public benefit, right? Because once accorded charity status, these institutions gain a number of fiscal benefits. Fiscal is nothing but financial benefits, advantages. So you definitely gain a lot of financial advantage because of your status as a charity. Status of the institute being elevated to that of a charity, the government gives you certain financial advantages. And then the author gives us an example. So here, corporation tax is basically, in India, we would call it company tax, right? Corporation tax is nothing but a tax that is imposed on the income of the institution, whatever the institution, and it's about 20% on of all profits is, and this, you know, so as a charitable organization, you don't pay any tax, whereas every other company or business tends to pay the 20% of all profits as tax. Now, the law should not allow a free for all. Now, the word free for all or the phrase free for all, what does it stand for? A situation where there are no rules, right? It's chaos and it leads to unfair advantage. Free for all simply means that no one is in control, there are no rules, and you do as you please. And therefore, the author is saying that the law should not allow this free for all, where any profit making company can become a charity by just doing a minuscule charitable act. Minuscule is a very tiny, tiny part of their business will be a charitable act, but they will claim a charity status for the company in order to avoid paying the tax, right? And nonetheless, charitable status is highly sought out by many. And now he ties this back into his first paragraph, which talked about public schools. So if you were to condense this whole paragraph into just one or two lines, what is the main point that the author is making? Basically, he's defining what it is to be classified as a charity, right? This is our topic sentence. And then an institute should demonstrate that they are in it for the public benefit, for the public good. They're doing that charity for the public good. And definitely this grants certain benefits. And that's why the law should prevent abuse of the status of a charitable institute. That is your main point. Contextual vocabulary, we have looked at fiscal benefits, nothing but financial advantages. Corporation tax, also known as company tax, right? A tax that is imposed on the income of the company or the corporation. Free for all, a situation where, of course, there are no rules, there's no control, and it's utter chaos, right? And people take unfair advantage when it is free for all. Connotations, fiscal benefits. It is benefits, obviously, it's a positive connotation. Okay, if you're a true charitable organization and the government says, yes, we are not going to impose any tax on you, that is going to be a welcome for that organization, right? So they will be happy with that. So that's a financial gain because that amount of money can be used for further charitable purposes. Free for all, of course, negative connotation. Why is that? Because it implies what? Chaos, disorder, unfairness, right? Therefore, that is negative connotation. So the next phrase is public benefit. I think we saw this here, right? Public benefit. It's a term that's used to describe an action that serves the public good or the greater good. Okay, anything that serves the greater good is called public benefit. Moving to the next paragraph. Again, a minute, read through it, try and make a main point, and if time permits, at least in your mind, understand what those contextual vocabulary words mean. And if possible, try and see what you can look that up also. You can Google it or use a dictionary, whatever serves. So public schools charge a fee for admission, and in contrast with state schools, which are funded by the government. So the author is bringing us back to his main issue with public schools charging fees and yet being accorded the status of a charitable institute, right? So they are, according to the author, public schools are private institutions and becoming charitable will definitely help with their finances because in paragraph 2, he told us what those benefits are, right? Now he says, whether this should be possible hinges on what acting for public benefit means and requires in the context of education. In other words, my main point in paragraph 3 is going to be that the author questions what constitutes public benefit in education. Because if I'm saying public schools are charitable organizations, then I need to know what is the public benefit that these schools are doing for education that the state schools are not doing, right? And therefore, that is the main point here. Contextual vocab, public schools, as we discussed a few minutes back, these are schools that are run by private individuals or a trust or an organization, anything but not the government. These are not aided schools. Okay, there's no aid coming in from the government. These are schools that charge fees. I think the simplest distinction between public schools and state schools is public will charge fees and state will not charge any fees. All right. And state schools are funded by the government, whereas public is funded privately by private citizens. Right. And here, private institutions, again, this is run by private people, right? Public schools are run by citizens of that country. They are independent of government control is one way to distinguish a government institute and a private institute. What's the big difference? That they're not run by the government, but instead they are independent of the government. Speaking of emotional association or cultural association, rather, in this context, Connotations for public schools and state schools. In the UK, public schools have a very positive connotation. Why? Because it talks about privilege. It talks about fee paying parents, right? So it is, if you're studying in a public school in the UK, then it is a privilege. State school is also seen in a very positive connotation. The cultural connotation is very positive for state schools because it talks about accessibility. Anyone can go to a state school, okay, because it's government run, it's free for all. It's as in, there's no fee charged, there's no fees that you have to pay. So it talks about accessibility. And public schools is about exclusivity because the fees are quite high. Okay. No idioms or phrases in this paragraph. Let's move to the next one, paragraph 4. All right. So this paragraph requires some close reading because there are different parties interested in the trial, right? So there's the ISC, the Independent Schools Council, there is the Charity Commission, and there is the Education Review Group. Okay, so now if you've been reading it closely, you will realize that who are on the opposing sides, the ISC is on one side and versus the Charity Commission and the Education Review Group. And why would I say that? Because the Education Review Group helped draft the Commission's guidance, right, which is right now disputed. Who brought the dispute? The ISC, the Independent Schools Council. They represent all the public schools. They sought a judicial review of the Charity Commission's guidance on what is required for a public school to demonstrate a public benefit, right? So there was a guidance given by the Charities Commission, and this is under dispute. So a few words that some of you may not be familiar with. Judicial review. What do we understand by judicial review? It's a process by which a court is asked to review the legality of a decision made by the government, okay, or any action that is made by a public body, an elected body. So judicial review is an appeal against a policy that's in place. All right, so now here you understand this. The Independent Schools Council, who basically represent all the public schools in the United Kingdom, they sought a judicial review of what? Of this guidance that was given by Charity Commission. This is a commission that basically drafted a guidance which said what organization will be classified as a charity. Okay, and they also defined what is required for a school to demonstrate that it's doing a public benefit. Okay, so obviously the ISC didn't like or didn't agree with whatever the guidance was, and that's why they went for a judicial review. Now let's look at the arguments they present. The ISC argued that they did provide a public benefit, but they face some opposition. What is the opposition? The Education Review Group, who also helped the commission to draft this guidance, they intervened in the case, advancing the arguments in the trial. Okay, so they've not told us exactly what arguments were made, but they've said that this group engaged in this case, in the trial. Ultimately, the tribunal held that the commission's guidance was wrong as a matter of law and required them to change it. Now, this is a decision that the court has taken, or the tribunal has done. What is a tribunal? It's basically a type of a court, but without your jury. Okay, the proceeding is in closed chambers, and it's usually convened to decide on matters, on disputes, and so on. So it's not an open trial. Okay, a tribunal is basically a type of court. It has a judge, but it listens to both sides and then gives the verdict. There is no jury in place. Another word, I think, adjudicate is, I think it comes up in this passage. Adjudicate is basically to judge or to decide on something. Okay, that's what a tribunal does. So they have said that the commission's guidance was wrong as a matter of law. They have not told us how it is wrong or what that matter of law is. That is irrelevant. Okay, the author's argument is that they found that this guidance was wrong on deciding who or what organization demonstrates the public benefit. The trial judge decided that in order to operate for the public benefit, a sufficient section of society must directly benefit from the education provided, which he said must include children whose parents would be unable to afford the fees without assistance. So here, the judge throws in a surprise element. He says that if you have to be of public benefit, then be for all people, right? Not just a select few who can afford the fees, but for everyone in society, even those who cannot afford your fees. All right. So I hope that's clear. Let's go to the next paragraph. You have a minute. Okay. So paragraph 5, though it's a small paragraph, it packs in a lot, right? See, the author tells us that in the trial, a number of arguments were presented on either side. Now, one such argument was that independent schools are a net cost to society as they remove able pupils from state schools and present barriers to social mobility. Okay, obviously, this argument is not presented by ISC or the public schools, but the others, right? So let's see what they said. The argument says that independent schools are a net cost to society. What do we understand by the word net cost? Net cost is basically once you weigh in all the financial implications, right? The negative financial impact after considering all the aspects is called net cost. Okay, so the argument says that the public schools are a net cost to society. Why? As they, so here we have the answers, as they remove able pupils from the state schools, that's the first one, and present barriers to social mobility. Breaking that down, what is able, how are they, what are they doing by removing the able pupils from state schools? What's happening here? Now, state schools are run by the government. They have limited resources and they have a fixed curriculum. Okay. Whereas the public schools are well funded, right? They charge high fees and therefore they have good resources. So what they do is able students, that is academically capable students, are more likely to find scholarship or something and therefore move towards these public schools. And the public schools make it very attractive to the parents also to move them. Okay. And what happens to the state schools? They lose talent. They lose academically or, otherwise talented students to the public schools. That is the first argument. That is remove able pupils from state schools. What else are they doing? They're presenting barriers to social mobility. What is social mobility? In society, when a person is able to climb the social ladder, right, the ability of that individual, be it through education or inheritance, he gets a lot of income or whatever, or through employment, if that individual has that ability to move within a social hierarchy, we call that social mobility. He's moving up in society. This can happen to a group of people or just an individual, right? But in this case, the argument was that the public schools are presenting barriers to social mobility. What they're doing is not allowing students from state schools to have the benefits that their own students have. And how are they doing it? By creating exclusivity, right? They have enhanced resources, enough resources to give them enhanced education. And the students from less affluent backgrounds, obviously they have fewer opportunities in the state schools, and therefore the argument says that the public schools are putting up these barriers. There's inequality in the education system. Access to quality education is not available to the students from the state schools. And therefore, the bigger impact on society is that of inequality, right? That the existence of socio-economic gaps tend to increase because what you're doing at the education level tends to influence the rest of your life and the economy as a whole. So we'll look at that. Net cost, social mobility. Net cost, what do you think is the connotation? Is it positive or negative? Net cost will be negative because it is a financial burden, right? And social mobility, of course, positive. Right? Someone is moving up in society. He's having a better standard of living. So therefore, it is a positive connotation. Remember, connotations are always emotional association or cultural association to a particular phrase or word. Okay, no idioms here. Let's move to the next paragraph. This is the last paragraph. You have a minute. Okay. So here the author concludes the passage. Okay, so this is the final paragraph. And like we looked at each main point in each paragraph, this is the concluding paragraph. So therefore, he's tying in all his arguments in this paragraph. Okay, so he is now taking the stand that there is some inherent public benefit because of education. Okay, so when you read the passage, you will see that he's talking about multitude of benefits. What do we understand by multitude of benefits? When he says private education provision can provide a multitude of benefits to society. Multitude simply means a large number, and benefits, you know, is advantages or a positive outcome. Indeed, it educates the children whose parents pay for the provision. Okay, while this may not seem inherently charitable, because parents are paying for the education, there are public benefits too. So here we see the author changing tact. We see the author moving from his strong viewpoint that public schools are not charitable institutions. Now he's telling us, despite parents paying for it, there are some public benefits too. And he supports his statement, firstly, and then somewhere, I guess there is a secondly somewhere. Okay, firstly, the provision of education in itself is a benefit. Of course, having a population, like if you look at a country like India, where the educated section of the society moved up in society, right? So like that, having an educated population benefits everyone. Why? Because your standard of living goes up. You all start paying taxes, and uh, a there is a the fall rate in crime, right? So the more educated you are, the more your civic sense is, the more awareness you have, and because you're engaged in work, in full-time work, you have less time on your hands, right, to engage in criminal activities. Also, that is the study. So here the author says that having an educated population have all these benefits, and by and large, this improves society. Okay. And then he says, and this is his counter argument, that is not to say that we should ignore the gap between public and state schools. And he says, indeed, state schools that are struggling should be willing to receive help from public schools, and public schools should, in accordance with their public duty, offer such help. So here the author brings in public duty. He says, what do we understand by the phrase public duty? It's basically an obligation that one has towards society. Okay. So when you're driving on the road, and if you observe lane discipline, you are doing a public duty, because uh, you are taking up that responsibility of sticking to your lane and not try and do rash driving, right? So that is a public duty, a responsibility or an obligation one has towards society. All right. So here the author says public schools, they must try and offer to help state schools as it's part of their, in accordance with their public duty. Okay. As an outreach of their public duty, they should try and help state schools that are struggling. And on the other hand, he's saying that they should be willing to receive help as well, right? So there are two different aspects to it. And that's how the author concludes it. Okay, so he took us through this entire passage, and I will put it up on the portal, the India Law Test portal, and it will be free resource. So you'll be able to see the whole passage in its entirety, and you can then see how each main point that you've made a note of for each paragraph ties in the whole thing. And if you were to combine all those 6 main points that you've made, right? All 6 main points, you bring them all together, and that is the main theme or the main central idea of this paragraph, of this whole passage called Charities and Public School. Okay. There's one word that we didn't look at, general economy. Basically, it is the overall economic system of a country. Okay, the general economy, not just a state or a city. We're talking about the entire country. So here, I think he must have said something about uh, an educated population helping the general economy. So this brings us to the end of analyzing this passage in its entirety. We have broken this passage up into each paragraph. We've looked at each paragraph and tried to figure out what the main point was. What is the author trying to tell us? When we understand the author, we are also saying that I am able to comprehend what I have read. Okay, and therefore, this is the first or one of the basic steps that you do. When you get a passage, break it down so that you know in each paragraph what is the main point that the author is trying to make. A couple of words that you've learned today, maybe some of them are familiar to you. Some phrases may not be so familiar. I hope it's been helpful. The second part of this class will deal with the passage and the questions that follow the reading comprehension passage. So let's do that after a short break. For those on our study portal, indialawtestprep.com, you will have the option to do this passage as a test. So you will be able to mark the answers, and you will be able to read the passage here and look at the question and the options here. For those of you watching this video on YouTube, I have the data here for you. So you should be able to view both the passage and the questions and options all together. So here you have the passage and the question on the side. And I hope this is visible and clear. All right, so when we deal with reading comprehension questions, a few things to keep in mind is to read the stem of the question. Or in other words, to understand what is being asked. So here in this question, for example, they have said, which of the following is definitely true based on the passage? Now, when they ask you a definitely true question, a question that says what is definitely true, what should come to your mind is if any of these options seem to be vague, inaccurate, incorrect, ambiguous, right? All of that is wrong. The only answer choice which can be checked against the passage and found to be true, found to be definitely true, okay, should be presented as a fact. Like, for example, if one of the options said that state schools are funded by the government. Now, I know that is given in the passage. I know it is definitely true, right? But if they said minority schools or, certain schools that have allegiance to certain religious groups, they are not funded or aided by the government. Now, that is not given in the passage. So it will be very vague statement. So that obviously is not my answer. Okay. So when you come across questions that ask you what is definitely true, please make sure that you can correlate it to a certain line in the passage. So let's look at the options. Okay, so you've had a minute to look at the options. Let's go by each one. A option, any institution that provides a public benefit gains fiscal benefits from the government. Okay, so is this true? No, because any institute that provides public benefit is not going to gain fiscal benefits or financial benefits from the government. Who gains financial benefits from the government? Only a charity. So an institution can provide public benefit, but not be a charity. For example, a trucking company, right? It's a logistics company. It's moving things. It is of public benefit, but it's not doing charity, right? So from the passage, we know that the government allows fiscal benefits, right? If your purpose of the organization is to do charity, only then the institution gains fiscal benefits from the government. So therefore, is this true? No. A is wrong. B option. Every organization would rather be a charity than a private company. Is this true based on the passage? No. There are organizations that are for profit, right? And they would rather be a private company and hold that profit privately than be a charitable institution. So B is wrong. C, if an organization is not a charity, it does not provide a public benefit. Again, this is very vague. This is not true. If an organization is not a charity, it could still provide some public benefit. Think of sports stadiums. Think of specialty hospitals. They're not running charities, but they are of public benefit. Public benefit of recreation in parks, in stadiums, and so on. Right? Your um, amusement parks, the zoos, and so on. And yeah, so this is wrong. D option, charities may not have to pay corporation tax. We have it directly from the example that the author has given us. For example, no corporation tax is paid on most types of income when once an organization is accorded charity status, right? So this is a direct benefit. This is definitely given in the passage. Therefore, I can support it from the fact in the passage. It's based on it. It's definitely true. E option. Well, we've got the right answer, but let's just check E option. The law should not allow a free for all. Okay. Now we looked at this free for all in detail while we discussed the passage. Well, this is the author's opinion, right? When he says the law should not allow a free for all where any profit making company can be a charity by just doing a minuscule, tiny amount of charitable act. And this would have a negative impact on the public purse, nothing but the treasury, right? So the author's opinion is that the law should prevent this abuse that's happening. There are certain organizations that do a very small, minuscule amount of charitable work and then claim charity status and then not pay that 20% of the tax from their profits. There are organizations that do that. And the author is of the opinion that this should not be allowed. Okay. I hope this is clear. Let's go to the next question. Now here the question is, which of the following is required if an organization is to become a charity? This type of question is looking for a specific information. You have to go back to the passage and look for that information. Okay, so, well, it's right here. In order to be classified or registered as a charity, it is necessary for an institution to demonstrate that its purpose for existence is for public benefit. Okay, what is required of an organization to become a charity? You have the answer right there. Now let's look at the options. A, to help the poor. Not necessarily. It's not a required purpose. What is a required purpose? That you demonstrate that your organization is there to do public benefit. Okay. Maybe you're not going to help the poor. Maybe you're going to help the handicapped or the differently abled or the mentally challenged, or it could be any specific group of people, maybe a certain section of society, and not necessarily help all the poor. Right? So this is not a requirement. We are looking for a requirement to become a charity. Okay. A is wrong. B option, nothing, not true. There is, in order to be classified and registered as a charity, it is necessary. It is required. There is a requirement in place. It is not nothing. Nothing will be the wrong answer. We have some conditions that are required to be fulfilled in order for an organization to turn into a charitable organization. C, to exist for public good. Yes, this is correct, right? Its whole purpose of existence is for the public good. Purpose is for public benefit, like it says here. D option, to demonstrate that the fiscal benefits or the financial benefits that come via the government channels gained would be for the public benefit. Not necessarily, right? Your focus, see here, the examiner is turned the whole thing on its head. He's saying, I will be, a requirement for me, for my organization to become a charity, is to demonstrate that whatever financial benefit I will receive, or by not paying tax, I save on that money, is going to do some public benefit. No, you must first do the public benefit, then you become a charity, and therefore you will be given the financial benefit. Okay, so therefore D will be wrong. E, to not make private profits? No, that is not a requirement. Okay. You could be a charitable organization and still make profits. No one stops you from doing that. Next question. Okay, so here the examiner is looking for some specific information which requires close reading. Okay, you should be able to look for specific information in this huge passage presented to you. Who is most likely to have advanced the argument that public schools are a net cost to society based on the passage? In other words, they're simply asking us who argued this, who placed this argument before the tribunal. Obviously, it's not the public schools. Could it be the Independent Public Schools Council? No, because they represent the public schools, right? The ISC is representing public schools. So they're not going to place an argument that works against them, that's calling them a net cost to society or a financial loss, right? So could it be the tribunal judges? No, because judges are impartial. They dwell on the arguments presented before them. They are not going to make arguments for either party. State schools. Did the state schools participate at the tribunal? In this passage, you will have the answer, those who have read the passage. We'll move on to the next option, the education review group, and E, the government. Okay. Now, between state schools and the government, here you must have read the passage in order to know who went in front of the tribunal in the first place. Who are the two parties who went to the tribunal? There was group A versus group B, right? So who are the participants in A and who are the participants in B? Let's look at this passage. ISC representing public schools sought a judicial review of the Charity Commission's guidance, right? That would tell you if a public school is doing public benefit, right? So group A is ISC representing public schools, and they went against who? The Charity Commission. And who helped the Charity Commission draft the guidance? The Education Review Group, right? It's here. The Education Review Group also advanced some arguments in the trial. So there is the Education Review Group. Now, because we don't have the commission, the Charity Commission in our options, our best answer is going to be the Education Review Group. All right. Why is option C and E vague? Because they don't feature here at all. Okay, the state schools did not participate in this tribunal, neither did the government. Sometimes it is good to eliminate wrong answers. Okay, so by that fact, I'm going to eliminate C and E, and D is my only answer. Next question. The question being asked is, which of the following is an opinion as opposed to a fact? Basically, they're looking for an opinion and not a fact. Okay? The framing of the question is such that you know that you're looking for an opinion and rather not a fact, as opposed to a fact. Now, there is a chapter we will handle, which is called facts versus opinion, and then inference and so on, right? So fact, inference, judgment, and so on. So at that point, we will go in detail. But for now, just understand that a fact is a verifiable information, and an opinion is something that is a belief. It is held by someone. Okay, I am of the opinion that doing something like making notes while studying is a good habit. Okay, it's not a fact of life. There must be people who can absorb information and not necessarily have to write down things, right? So therefore, an opinion is simply a belief that that you hold on to, and a fact is something that is information that can be verified. Now, in this case, all facts presented to us should be verified uh, in this given passage itself. It should be present in the passage, otherwise it's not a fact. So let's look at the options. A option. The tribunal did not consider the argument that there was a net cost to society. So it's right here. So remember, they said that public schools are a net cost to society because they do two things. One is remove talented and able pupils from state schools, and the other is to present barriers to social mobility, right? To climb the social hierarchy. So here, the tribunal did not consider such an argument as it related to a political issue rather than a judicial one. Okay, nothing in law stops public schools from offering, reduced fees or offering a seat to a academically good student from a state school. Nothing in law stops that. Okay. Similarly, these barriers presented is a notion that is held by some people, that we are not in touch with the elite classes and therefore our social mobility is impaired. Okay, that the public schools are placing these barriers. This is not a fact of life. There are people who from state schools who must have progressed into society. Of course, maybe not many doors opened because of their surnames or the family that they come from. Okay. So, however, the tribunal therefore thought that this was a political issue and not a judicial one because there's nothing illegal about it. Okay. And what does a tribunal do? They only look at two things. What is that? Any lawyer, any judge, when he's looking at a case, right, he's not looking at moral obligation or political correctness. What do they look for? They look at how the law can be interpreted and how that law is being applied in this case. Okay. So therefore, when the tribunal was presented with this argument that public schools are moving able students from state schools or presenting barriers to social mobility, the tribunal did not find anything that was illegal, right? They did not see anything wrong with what was being done. So therefore, they think it's a political issue, right? So this is something that is given in the passage, right? It is not an opinion of the author. The tribunal did not consider such an argument is definitely a fact, right? But I'm looking for an opinion, not a fact. So my A option is wrong. B option, no corporation tax is paid on most types of income. Can I find this information? Isn't this true that if you're a charity, they do not charge you any tax? right? It is given here. In order to be classified, you read the whole thing, you will know no corporation tax is paid on most types of income, right? It's given here. So this is definitely a fact, not an opinion. I'm looking for an opinion, okay? Public schools charge a fee for admission. Again, I know this is a fact, so not the right answer. The law should not allow a free for all. Where did we see that? The law should not allow free for all. Yeah, it's here. The law should not allow a free for all where any profit making company can be a charity by just doing minuscule charitable act. This would have negative impact. What is being said here? This is the author's opinion. He thinks that the law shouldn't allow it. He thinks it's unfair that some companies or some organizations are doing small acts of charitable acts, right? Charitable in nature. They're doing some certain acts, and then they are expecting this financial benefit of not having to pay 20% of all profits as tax. So this is an opinion of the author. So this is my correct answer. E option, a charity has to demonstrate that it operates for public benefit. Yes, this definition itself holds that, right? Its purpose is this. So therefore, this is a fact, therefore not my answer. This is the only opinion that I can find, and this is my answer. Which of the following is an opinion as opposed to a fact? Next question. All right. The next question says, which of the following would have adequately supported the argument that there is a public benefit from public schools before the tribunal? Okay. What is being asked here? That one of these options would make a great argument to show that there is public benefit, okay, from the existence of these public schools. If I were to present it in a different way, the Independent School Council, right, which represents all these public schools, if they had presented the correct answer here, if they had presented that as their argument before the tribunal, then it would have been in favor of the public schools. So can you identify that particular argument that could work in favor of public schools? All right. So now that you've read the options, let's see what the tribunal said. The tribunal, what did they decide finally? Ultimately, the tribunal held that the commission's guidance was wrong as a matter of law, and they asked them to change it. Okay, the guidance was to define what is public benefit and how public schools would be required to demonstrate that public benefit, right? So the tribunal said, no, your guidance is wrong, and we require it to change. The trial judge decided that in order to operate for public benefit, a sufficient section of society must directly benefit from the education provided. And he adds that this should include, or this must include, children whose parents are unable to afford the fees without assistance. Okay, so now you know what the tribunal stands for. Look at the options. Public schools educate the children whose parents pay for it. Now, how is this a public benefit? No, therefore, not my answer. Public schools provide scholarships to others who can't afford the fees. It definitely addresses this issue, right? And therefore, it is my correct answer. We'll check the other options. C option, public schools can make better use of money as opposed to being paid through tax. Well, not necessarily. See, this is how they make use of the money is not the criteria here. Okay. D option, public schools are better than state schools. Of course, it's a comparison. They have more resources and they are well funded and all that. But will that make a good argument in front of the tribunal? No. E option, state schools can learn from public schools. Of course, you can learn. You know, you learn from the best people, but to implement it, you need resources, right? Again, making this argument before the tribunal is not going to help my case. Therefore, this is wrong. Well, so the right answer is option B. And yes, here's the answer key. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I hope this has been a good experience for you and you have learned something new. Basically, how to approach certain questions, what type of questions are asked, and also how to eliminate wrong answers. And if you're interested in signing up for our courses, do contact us. We are available on WhatsApp as well, or you can send us an email. The indialawtestprep.com. I'll leave a link in the description below. You can explore the different courses that we offer and get in touch with us. Thank you.